Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every week we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Hello, my loves. Welcome to the show. In today's modern world, women are selling themselves short, prioritising the mundane over the magical in order to secure the love, approval and safety of a spiritless society. And in doing so, they are forgetting their true power. So I'm regularly sharing some powerful inquiries and practices over in my Secret Witch Circle on Facebook for those who long to reclaim their radiance and majesty as a powerful creatrix. Search Secret Witch Circle on Facebook groups and I'll see you there. In today's episode, I am thrilled to be diving into the topic of how to tend your nervous system and create the safety required to be yourself. The Secret Witch has a really poorly modelled relationship with fear, and her nervous system is usually a bit fried and feels very unsafe. On top of that, she is often disconnected from her body. And in this way of being, it's difficult to tune into her heart's longings and live a soul-aligned path. In this episode, I dive into how to do the work to liberate your relationship with fear, heal your disconnection with your body, and create autonomy for your own nervous system so that you can consciously and courageously choose into ways of being that align with soul in order to create a magical life. Let's dive in. Today, I thought it would really be of service to dive into the topic of our nervous system. The topic of fear has come up a lot recently for my clients, so I've been sharing quite a bit on fear. And so I thought it'd be really good to talk about how to tend our nervous system to create the safety required to be ourselves, because that is something that secret witches often tend to struggle with, and it's really important, even just being able to create for ourselves the safety to be able to dream. Sometimes we can be so scared to dream because we're not tending our nervous system. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit as we go on. But and also just to say, obviously I'm not immune from doing the work. So as I navigate even more pretty big expansion myself, obviously fear arises for me. But what I see is kind of different between a secret witch and a liberated witch is really the relationship with fear and the tending to our nervous system. So that's what we're going to be diving into in today's episode. Now, often the secret witch comes to me not feeling safe, and I just want to presence that really has been a huge part of my own journey, having kind of experienced a vast number of experiences that have left me feeling unsafe in the world in the past. And yeah, just all sorts of things come to mind. I mean, when I was 16 on my first day of college, I changed from the school that I felt safe in and went to college. And at the time, on the very first day, I actually ended up being drugged. And so somebody found me unconscious after somebody had stolen my handbag. And I ended up being whisked unconscious to hospital and kind of didn't really remember 5 hours of my life. And although I was absolutely fine, you can then see how that kind of instills a fear, instills the idea that the world isn't safe within your body. And it wasn't until I was kind of really doing the work that came to light as having been an old story that has created this feeling of not being safe within my body. So there's been a lot of tending to that. And I think it's definitely something that's part of the Secret Witch journey, is having had experiences that leave us feeling unsafe, but also we can get to a point, I share this because we can get to a point of having processed these fears and the kind of lack of safety, and eventually feel safe in our bodies again. And the importance of that work is because when we have done that, we get to a point which leaves us free to focus in the direction of magic as our full majesty. So we free up ourselves to be able to focus in the direction of who we long to be. And often, as secret witches, we've been kind of taught, really, as in society, to respond to fear with kind of fight or flight, and that's a very kind of instinctive way of responding. But it's the way that we have been kind of taught, I guess, is not particularly a healthy, full expression of fight or flight. It's often more of a shadowy evade or defend, and this makes perfect sense. Don't get me wrong. In a society that values kind of, I guess, more masculine ways of being, of kind of defense, of aggression, or the opposite actually, or avoidance, or kind of passive aggressive ways of being when we are feeling fearful. So we're kind of not taught healthy ways of tending to our fears and creating our own safety. And even, I mean, you know, I've been heavily embedded in the work of self-help for decades now, and even much self-help often reinforces this by kind of this firm, fierce boundary setting, like you need to just say no and set your boundaries. And there's something wrong with that, in my experience, having walked this path, it's kind of missing the love, which is a key ingredient in tending our nervous system. So again, I'm going to dive into that. But yeah, if we're traumatized and kind of barge around trying to force our boundaries on someone, often this is still coming from fear. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit, but we won't really see that until we start to dive more into shadow work and kind of seeing what we've pushed into the darkness. But when that happens, often when we've experienced fear and our nervous system is revved up, is that we end up, instead of tending to ourselves with love and listening more deeply to our bodies, which is always the invitation, we instead lean into dissociating from our bodies, often dishonouring ourselves, leaving things unprocessed, because really we're just too damn scared to go there. And usually then too, what happens with the secret witch is they then kind of shove their own needs into a box and start to put everyone else first, because the secret witch, if you remember from the first few episodes where I explored who the secret witch is, the secret witch sells her soul to gain love, approval and safety from others. So when she's in fear, she'll immediately likely go to others for the safety she can actually create herself. And again, that's totally understandable. It's based on a misunderstanding of our own power, and it's something that we have learned. So if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, that's me, and it's bringing up a little bit of shame or whatever it's bringing up for you, this is the invitation to bring love to this too, because all is welcome. So all that is happening in that is that we're really not used to facing fear consciously, and we get caught in being a victim to it. And that might sound quite bold, I guess. It certainly feels quite bold to say, because I think when you're in fear, you don't really necessarily associate with being a victim, and especially if you've experienced trauma. But the biggest misunderstanding of the secret witch that I've come to see is that we are the creators of our lives and that we have the power. So I'm not wanting to sound dismissive or blaming here when I say that. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to hear this and say, what? I created my trauma, and feel kind of blame, shame, or... I mean, I say I don't want you to feel triggered. Likely if you feel triggered by that, then that's somewhere to start looking. But again, with the utmost of love. And still, what I've come to see is that we literally do create all of it. Or at the very least, our soul came here to experience it in the case of trauma, in order to alchemize our darkness into gold. And it comes to mind that there's almost this kind of, and I'll talk about this again later, but there's almost this kind of cyclical, like we experience trauma and then kind of end up relaying the same trauma over and over again until we've processed it properly and looked at it directly. So what comes to mind as I say that actually is the idea that on my first day of school, my dad left and everything went into chaos. Everything just was up in the air, and very traumatic. And again, it's like the first day of college, something very traumatic happens. So It's quite interesting when you start to look at these patterns in our lives that are being created unconsciously. But to do that, to be able to look there, you need to bring a lot of love to it. So I say this because I want to help you begin to know that you can create a new story. I'm digressing a little bit, but really the point is that we witches are powerful creators, and we create all of life, whether we've created a magical one or a mundane one. And we have the capacity to change our focus to create the life we desire. But to do that, we need to tend our nervous system to create the safety for us to be our wild, radiant, magical selves, despite the fears that bubble up. So this isn't about kind of avoiding fear. This is not about kind of feeling a victim to fear. It's about kind of reclaiming the power that we are. So the key thing as well, just to say here, is that the reason we don't shame ourselves for our creation of past fear is that it is created totally unconsciously. So we didn't know this was happening. We've innocently lived through trauma and disconnected from our bodies as part of that unconscious process. We didn't know that that's what we were doing. And in that way, I guess when we were unconscious, we were victims to it, quite understandably. This is how we were taught to be in the world. But we have more power than we give ourselves credit for, and it's time for that to change. So the way to change it is to make it more conscious. So like now, as we're beginning to peel back these layers, we can begin to recreate our lives from majesty. But in seeing our role in how we create our lives is where we begin to reclaim our power. So really, we need to begin to see our role in the experiences we have created for ourselves unconsciously so that we can shift our focus to create new ways of being. And as I said, to do this, we need much love. If you're feeling triggered by this, it's a sure sign that there needs to be more love brought to your wounds. Especially because as the first step into this, it will be quite scary. So if you've experienced trauma of any kind, and I bring a lot of love to you if you have, it's still a terrifying journey back into our bodies, even if we have begun to glimpse our capacity to heal and expand through it and create new ways of being. So if you're here listening to this and taking on that responsibility and that ownership of it, I'm just really honouring you for that. And I talked about actually the descent or a descent in my last solo podcast last month. And really, very often the creation of autonomy for our nervous system involves a reconnection of the relationship with our bodies. And if we have experienced trauma that has had us bounce out of our bodies, and I can think of times again where I have felt out of my body, when I was getting married was one of them. Again, that wouldn't necessarily seem traumatic to some people, but for me, there was a lot of triggering, a lot of trauma in my first marriage. So it felt like I was out of my body, and my divorce actually was one great example of my descent. So I do fully understand and know how difficult that descent can be, and if we have experienced trauma, that can be difficult. It can be a difficult journey, a difficult descent to go into. And so because of that, we've learned typically to ignore, shame and avoid our fears and wounds, often suppressing them and not dealing with them as we would in the wild. And again, I'm going to come to that shortly because there's a great book that I'm going to recommend which really does offer a liberating pathway to create autonomy for the nervous system and healing trauma. But basically, firstly, we have to reconnect with our bodies. Something that can at first feel really scary as secret witches, all those fears, desires and traumas that can bubble up to be seen and held. And often we are not connected with our bodies, and this can show up in lots of different ways. We can experience pain, we can experience chronic illness, we can experience numbness, or all sorts of ways. Things that, for example, like menstrual cycle troubles is a common one for the secret witch, because we really are disconnected from the natural rhythms and natural cycles of our body. So all of these things, I put desires in there on purpose because desires can feel quite scary if we're not used to really kind of looking in that direction, because desires ultimately kind of to follow them require some sacrifice of our ways of being. So to kind of look in the direction of possibility of change is quite scary as well, for those people who don't have autonomy over their nervous system. And we'll come to that a bit more. But I wrote a post about all of this actually this week, because the Secret Witch's relationship with fear is often just terror, because it hasn't been modelled how to harness fear and have a good relationship with it. So, for example, you'll see by the end of this podcast today that actually we can choose into fears. When we have a good relationship with our nervous system, we begin to be able to consciously choose into fears that align with soul rather than avoiding them. And I suspect that if you're here listening to this, there's some soul-aligned healing that you're here to do to be able to liberate your gold from the darkness that you've experienced. So, yeah. Exciting stuff. So yeah, it has very much been my own experience. I have suffered disconnection from my own body. I actually ignored my own nervous system and body for years when I was younger, which led me to having chronic illness. I had chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic pain. My nervous system was fried. I mean, I suffered anxiety, panic attacks and all sorts. Even more recently, I created my birth to be traumatic because of the fear I had of birthing, and due to the ignorance I kind of had with my body at the time due to being in an ascension path. And in the last solo episode, I talked about ascension and descension. So if you haven't listened to that, then head back to that and you'll find a little bit more about that. But during my pregnancy, right at the end, my face became paralysed because I disconnected from my body. My face basically became numb. I've been magically healing that since, and it's pretty much there. But it really did invoke more of a descent in me, which led to actually where I am today, creating this podcast for Secret Witches, because I began to see how we really are powerful creatrixes. I had created all of that in my body by walking this ascension path, by living in fear. So now I really do see that we are the majestic queens of our lives, and once we begin to embody that instead, it all becomes a little bit easier. But we do need to dive into the well of our bodies in order to create that magical transformation and to tend our nervous systems to create the safety that we need to be those majestic queens. There's actually a really good bit about the descent in The Heroine's Journey by Maureen Murdoch. So again, another great book recommendation. It's really highly recommended, but I just thought I'd share a quote, and I don't know quite actually why I didn't share this in the episode of Descent or Dissension. So, but here we are. Meant to share it today instead. So in The Heroine's Journey, Maureen Murdoch says, "The descent is characterized as a journey to the underworld, the dark night of the soul, the belly of the whale, the meeting of the dark goddess. This journey to the underworld is filled with confusion and grief, alienation and disillusion, rage and despair. A woman may feel naked and exposed, dry and brittle, or raw and turned inside out. I felt this way. Each time I had to face truths about myself and my world that I wished not to see. And each time I was chastened and cleansed by the fires of transformation." Yes, so wow. Yeah, that really speaks to what it can be like to dive into the well of our bodies and really begin to heal our traumas consciously. And I don't know if you felt it, but I really felt that. I really felt like, oh, wow, that's scary. But also, you can really see how truly beautifully transforming it is, how it aligns us more beautifully with being our full truth, with being who we came here to be, kind of aligning us with our soul path. And we talked before about how all is welcome. You can really see how all really is welcome here, and how allowing ourselves to feel it all, to hold it all, to reconnect to those things we have hidden in the darkness of our shadow, really helps us to alchemize our wounds into our gifts and kind of be cleansed by the fires of transformation that she talks about there. So if you're listening here today because you're longing to discover and become the exact soul gift that you came here to be, then this is the journey for you, and you're going to need to tend to your fear to be able to even begin to go and look there. We must first heal and feel safe. So without creating the safety required for this journey, without tending to our nervous systems, the descent is going to be a lot harder. And I have actually walked part of the descent without being conscious, without this kind of revived relationship with fear, this more conscious relationship with fear. And I can tell you now, it was a lot harder to do that than it is to do it now. Now I kind of choose into the fears that are aligned with my soul. So that is still involves a lot of tending of the nervous system, but nowhere near as much as it used to when I was unconsciously creating from fear. So yeah, I hope that inspires some confidence. Yeah. So it really does take courage to be ourselves, and often this in itself does generate enough fear to kind of shut down some of the powerful women that I work with. And so there's a lot of liberation of that in this pathway, and a lot of opening ourselves up to dreaming about who we desire to be, about what we long for. This is often terrifying for the women that I work with, terrifying. And it's because we just aren't used to choosing into the fears that allow us to choose to take ourselves to our edge. It's not been modeled to us, and yet we can do that. We can choose into fear, and often people aren't sure even why we would. So my question is whether we want to choose to stay a victim to fears that we create unconsciously and kind of be dragged along by life, feeling very much at life's mercy, selling our souls to get safety from others, or we can embody our queenly majesty and step into our power and tend to our own bodies and souls and choose consciously into the fear of fully being ourselves in order to become the gift that we came here to be. So it's our choice. Even when it's conscious, we can still choose victimhood, but it's far more powerful and kind of soul-fulfilling to choose our majesty. So actually a really good practice or reflection for you in the first step towards tending our nervous system and creating our own safety is kind of a cost benefits analysis. So often it feels scarier because we just haven't yet learned how to tend our nervous system. We're going to go into that. Yes, we haven't learned to tend our nervous system to create our own safety. So that's the first step, and we will go into how to do that very shortly. But we really can find power in creating our own safety. And so my invitation to you is firstly to weigh up the costs and benefits of staying a victim to our nervous system and fear versus stepping into our majesty to create the safety required for us to live our truth. And I'd invite you to literally make a list of this. It's a really powerful reflection. So considering so the inquiry is, what are the costs of staying a victim to your nervous system and the unconscious fears that are driving you versus what are the benefits of this? Because yes, there will also be some benefits of staying as the victim. For example, not having to tread the more difficult path, and even these benefits can keep us stuck, is something that is quite powerful to see. So make a list of what the costs and benefits are of staying a victim to your nervous system. You might want to do it the opposite way as well, kind of the stepping into the majesty, what the costs and benefits are of kind of living our truth. So there's some powerful inquiry for you if you're just wanting to explore that a little bit more. You'll start to really begin with that inquiry to get a sense for what the sacrifices are of not choosing to create the autonomy for your nervous system. So the biggest sacrifice of all is that you won't become your true self. The biggest price we pay for not choosing to create our own safety, i.e. continuing to sell our soul for love, approval and safety, as is the pattern that secret witches have often lived, So yeah, the biggest price we pay for not choosing to create our own safety is that we never become who we came here to be. Whew, so that feels big again. So yeah, just without feeling safe and tending our nervous system, we will not feel safe enough to dream our big dreams. We might stay feeling lost. We might feel like we still need to discover our gifts, even though we have a sense we're made for more. And just to point out as well, if I hadn't made it clear already, is that if you can't access your dreams and vision, it's likely you just don't feel safe to. And this is a price that we pay for not choosing to create our own safety. And yet, there's still no beating up about that. You know, we have to go here and look at this without beating ourselves up for the fact that we have been doing this unconsciously. And of course, by listening to this, you are reclaiming your capacity to choose. So yeah, if you are still listening, then I absolutely salute you, because that takes a lot of power to own, accept and honor the very kind of taking of responsibility for all of your unconscious creations, and for the decision to continue along the descent to soul. That all takes a lot of courage. So yeah, celebrating you in being here. Now, so how then do we actually begin to create autonomy for our nervous system so that we can choose to create the safety required for us to live our wildest alchemy as our soul's truth? Well, I talked a little bit actually about self-help, because I think one of the things that people often try to do, especially if they're kind of entrenched in self-help and again, like me of the past, is to aggressively create boundaries and become a little bit angry about it. That's definitely my path, that, you know, and it's something I've noticed in shadow for me. So the first step really is noticing what's in shadow. So I would have walked around kind of being a bit passive aggressive about needing to honour my boundaries. A bit like, right, I'm taking my time now. I need time for myself to have some self-care, as I kind of waltzed off to have a bath and left my husband kind of just in complete bewilderment. So yeah, I've been there. It's also what we've been taught to do with all that kind of just say no and honour what you need. And I suspect it's either that way of being, or the other shadow element of that might just be not taking any time for yourself at all. And I've also been there, but learnt the hard way with that when I developed chronic fatigue syndrome, because that was my life pre-chronic fatigue, is that I just wouldn't take any time for myself at all. Both are kind of opposite ends of the kind of scales, the polarity of that particular shadow. So whilst this is a great way to get our needs met, it's one that is heavily entrenched in fear. It's quite passive aggressive. It doesn't actually help us to create consciously. It's still from shadow. And so that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying just, you know, right, we've got to passively aggressively honor our boundaries. That's still coming from fear. And if it's unconscious, then it's always shadow. So the aim for us to tend our nervous system well is to see what's in shadow so that we can choose new ways of being. So often, because things are in shadow, often secret witches will feel that they can't choose into liberating themselves because the old stories that come up are too scary. And this is kind of the power of the work that we do to liberate ourselves from that as well, rather than just plastering tools and techniques over the top of our hidden, shadowy old stories and beliefs. So this is really important. This is deep work. It's not just tools and techniques that we just use for no reason. We use them consciously. It's really important that we use them with intention. And again, this is why, understandably, secret witches often have a negative relationship with fear, because it's just not been modelled how to liberate their fears and choose into some of the scary feeling soul aligned paths that help us create and become who we really are. And yet, this way of being, this kind of choosing into the scary feeling soul aligned path, feels way more loving. So instead of kind of cavorting from one mad chaotic experience to the next, to the next, to the next at the mercy of fear, we can begin to choose into the fears that are really for us in order for us to expand in alignment with our soul. So some might call this the kind of experiences and creations from our true will. So those are things that are in alignment with that co-creation that we talked about in a previous episode. I think it was the descent episode again. So in alignment with that co-creation of soul and the universe. And really, the difference there is a lot of love and a lot of conscious choice. So anything that isn't coming from conscious choice is still coming from fear. So if you're just following self-help boundary setting without actually looking into, illuminating what is going on, it's not deep enough, because your boundary setting is still coming from fear, and that fear can be quite compelling. But again, the other part of that that's really important is that when we're in our power with tending to our nervous system, it actually feels totally loving and beautiful, not just for you, but for everyone. You can see in that previous example, the passive aggressive boundary setting, it's uncomfortable for everyone. But when we're in our power, it's our power from love. And again, this isn't a way we're used to talking about power. Power conjures up all these kind of different ideas about kind of very masculine, dominating power. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm going to do an episode, I keep saying this, on a power from love, but that's very much been a part of my journey. But when we're in our power tending to our nervous system, and with anything, it feels totally loving, totally beautiful for everyone. So our fears even become to feel more open, more expansive, more chosen. So the boundary setting becomes almost like a loving honouring of the body and of our nervous system, and gets created and negotiated from our power from love. And we do this again by illuminating and liberating the shadowy beliefs that make us feel we need to either aggressively demand our needs or avoid asking for them completely. And if we're aggressively boundary setting in isolation from the deeper work, it's completely useless. And again, likewise, if we're avoiding asking for our needs completely, usually there's a reason hiding under the layers of old stories and experiences and the stories created about these experiences. And it's that we want to really get to. So often it tends to be in The Secret Witch that, and this again is a common theme in The Secret Witch, is that the Secret Witch thinks that she isn't worthy of tending her needs. And that might not be something that you see immediately. That's kind of takes some work to get to seeing that is kind of where you're creating from. It kind of needs powerful illumination in order for us to be able to begin to lovingly offer ourselves ways of tending to our needs and negotiating those openly, lovingly, and in a way that serves everyone. But seeing that it is our feelings of unworthiness to tend our needs is a way of beginning to understand ourselves and reclaim our power. So even just illuminating that is really powerful. And don't get me wrong, this is just an example. It may not be worthiness for you, it may be something else, but worthiness is really a common thread that I notice within both my own story and within the stories of my clients. So it's so common that the Secret Witch feels unworthy of all sorts of things, of like the investment in herself to be able to tend to her nervous system and create safety. If this particularly looks like prioritizing her needs over the family's, or investing time to listen in deeper to what she needs or what her body is telling her, whether that's investing financially in, say, yoga or some sort of coaching program. These are the sort of huge barriers that Secret Witches put in front of things because they don't feel worthy enough. And so instantly fear comes in and the nervous system's revved up. But yet ultimately, it's your choice. You can begin to see these stories and choose again. So before I go into the how, I just wanted to present this because again, it helps to know it's not just you. And firstly, therefore, I want you to know that you're so worthy of tending to your needs in order to walk your soul's path. It's not even debatable. So that is really important to presence because your body simply just wants to be heard. That's why it doesn't feel safe. And the moment you begin to feel worthy enough to listen is the moment that you start to begin to create your safety. And you'll likely create it consciously in loving, soul-aligned ways, which may still feel scary to do, but they'll be more powerful and more aligned. And as you do begin to listen, you'll slowly begin to see that you're not at the mercy of your nervous system, and you can create new stories and tend to your nervous system with majesty. So, practically, how does this all work? How do we create autonomy and tend our nervous system in practice? I'm going to get onto this now. I mentioned earlier that there's a great book to begin to choose into healing our trauma and creating autonomy for our nervous system. And I'm going to share that book with you now. It's called Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. And this is an amazing book all about how when the human animal is confronted with a life-threatening situation, our rational brains become confused and override our instinctive processes. So when we talk about instinctive processes, it's those kind of instinctive processes that are seen in the wild. And he talks very much about how in the wild the process isn't interfered with, but in kind of domestication of our humanness, he talks about how the residue of trauma often gets trapped in our nervous system, and then it can kind of wreak havoc on our bodies and minds due to us not completing the trauma process. So if we can discharge all our compressed energy, he says, we can move through trauma. But if not, we become victims to it. And he also describes how unless we liberate this energy, we unknowingly and repeatedly create situations in which the possibility to release ourselves from the trauma trap, we create those situations over and over again in order for our bodies to be able to complete the trauma process. But without knowing how, often we fail and we get caught in this cycle of trauma, which is really interesting. And I was just really taken by that when I considered the experience from school, because as I said, my dad left when I was 4 on my first day of school. I then created, when I was changing from the school I've been in into college, a big transition period. It's like I again created that trauma when I was drugged. It was like that came up to be healed, and again at the time didn't know how to get out of that trauma. But fortunately now I have read this book and done the work on that. So yeah, really amazing book. I can highly recommend. And I'm just going to share now actually a quote from the book. So Peter Levine says, fortunately, the same immense energies that create the symptoms of trauma, when properly engaged and mobilized, can transform the trauma and propel it into new heights of healing, mastery, and even wisdom. Trauma resolved is a great gift, returning us to the natural world of ebb and flow, harmony, love, and compassion. I believe we humans have the innate capacity to heal not only ourselves, but the world from the debilitating effects of trauma. Wow. And I mean, even just that speaks to the fact that if we do the work ourselves, that has a collective impact. So it just blows my mind, really, how important this work is. And again, if we can choose into it from our majesty, then it's just such a powerful step towards shifting the world and shifting the collective. So really, really important work to choose into if that is something that you are leaning into. And again, for my clients who are listening, really, really do honour you for just choosing that path. It's beautiful. So yeah, gorgeous. Now, I'm going to, again, make another invitation into a powerful practice here so that I can offer you the first steps into tending your nervous system. And the reason for this is because these first steps will begin to show your body that someone with power has shown up. That is so important. Now, Peter Levine shares loads of practices in this book to help, actually, which are really powerful. And again, you can kind of work through to... I read this book in a day, by the way. It was amazing. So I really do recommend that you go out and have a look at that, have a read of it if you're feeling drawn in that direction, because there are some powerful practices in it. But I'm just going to share one of my favourites here today, because I do really want to invite you into a powerful practice to begin to reconnect with your body in order that you can tend your nervous system, so you can begin to offer yourself the safety for the rest of this journey. And listening into and connecting to your body is really the first step, and that will not only offer you a powerful first step to tend your nervous system with love and show your body that someone with power has shown up to interrupt its normal fear response, but it'll also be an important first step for you in terms of allowing yourself to listen to your body's desires and heart's longings. Because, and I think I said this a little bit earlier, until you feel immensely safe to be in your body, like in your body, not out of it, not dissociated from it, until you feel immensely safe in your body, you will not hear your body's desires and heart's longings. We need to create the safety to be in our bodies in order to continue walking the path of soul. That is so important, because again, the body is the sacred vessel for our soul. The body is the space where our soul can dance. It's the only place where we can create magic. So being in the body, feeling safe to be in our bodies, is kind of critical to this path. So yeah, just wanted to point that out and really hammer it home. That is like so important, and it's like literally one of the main parts of the path, the Live Your Wild Alchemy program that I do, is body and soul, two parts of the kind of 7-point path that I walk with people. So yeah, going back to Peter Levine, he talks about how the disconnection between body and soul is one of the most important effects of trauma. And he shares an exercise to welcome the soul back to the body, which I just love. I love the whole idea of welcoming the soul back to the body. That's just, that's just gorgeous. It lights me up. So kind of speaks to what I was just saying, firstly, about us not being able to walk a soulful path until we're back in our bodies. So this really simple practice that I invite you into to get started on this journey is one that will help you begin to reconnect to your body and invite the soul back into your body in order to create autonomy for your nervous system. So this is the ritual, the practice. So for 10 minutes each morning during your daily shower, scan your body with a cool or slightly warm shower head, noticing the different sensations that are arising as you expose your body to the water. And as you do this, you're going to cover every part of your body. So just spend a few minutes on every part from your head to your toes. So the head, the forehead, your neck, your chest, your back, your legs, your arms, your pelvis, your hips, thighs, calves, ankles and feet. So every area of your body. And just begin to pay attention to the sensations arising in each area, just noticing them. And really, as you do this, just really notice the sensations. I'm kind of giving my own spin on this exercise in his book now, actually, but I think but for me, it's really like the more we can label the sensations, the more autonomy we are creating for our nervous system. So really try and be descriptive about them. So I don't know, if your chest is feeling tight, does it feel tingly? Does it have a colour associated with it? Does it feel hot? Does it feel cold? Every kind of sensation, just notice and label it. And even if that feels blank, numb or painful, and as you do it, say, this is my head, this is my neck, and I welcome you back. So this is my head and I welcome you back. Really simple. Another way of doing this, if you're not keen on the cold or slightly warm shower head, is just by gently slapping the different parts of your body quite briskly. And this is just beginning to help to re-establish a sense of a body with skin sensation. So Again, noticing how the sensations feel in each area, labeling them in as much detail as possible. This is your deep invitation to welcome the soul back to the body. Now, having defined what those activities are, what this ritual is to welcome the soul back to the body, whilst you're doing all of that, please honour your body. Make sure that you are loving and you don't push yourself past your edge. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or disturbed, you are way past your edge and you need to stop. This is about listening to yourself and honouring your body's signals. So no pushing involved at all. This is the way that we begin to let your body know that the powerful majesty of you, your powerful majesty, is showing up to create safety. Because you choose when you stop, you choose when you come back to safety at any point. And by doing this, you're interrupting the pattern and helping your nervous system recognize that someone with power has shown up. This is so important. I can't even stress enough how important it is that you honor your body. Now, there are other ways as well, beautiful ways of connecting to our body that I love, that are also really powerful to help our nervous system know that we're tending to its needs. And it's quite individual, so they may speak to you, they may not. But anything generally body-led is a good practice to begin to open ourselves up and create some safety. So things like body-led movement practices, which is where you move freely, just completely how you want to move, in line with how your body wants to move. You might put some music on, and just might be that you don't move very much at all. It might be that you move gently. It might be that you really go for it and dance. And again, dance, really embodied practice. So activities like sensual dance can be really powerful, particularly if there is some kind of feminine trauma. But again, really go gently with that. Yin yoga. Gosh, there are so many practices, so many different practices. And yeah, these can all be really liberating. But again, that invitation, not even an invitation, it's so important that you don't push past your edge with this, with all of it. So the choice really is yours. Really can be very soul-led. Feel into what feels aligned for you, what will get you back in your body. I just wanted to share those few examples so that you can begin to start taking some small steps towards the path for yourself, to begin investigating ways to create your own safety, to be in your body. So, as you begin to create that safety for yourself to be in your body, your nervous system will reward you. It will learn that you're listening to it and that it's safe for you to access your soul-aligned dreams. So it will open up a powerful portal directly to your soul in order for new possibilities to come in. So you'll likely, as you feel safer, instead of being focused in the direction of trauma and all the stuff that needs processing, you'll likely have more time to focus in the direction of your dreams and the vision that you long to create. And you'll spend less time stuck in the fear cycle. And so we must really begin to honour our fear and not dismiss it and not suppress it. And as we do, we begin to be able to create that majesty, to be able to refocus and transform into who we long to become. Because for a start, we're now going to begin to feel safe to dream. And as we become more practiced, as we become more familiar with tending to our nervous system and creating our own safety consciously, we consciously begin to understand that all the old stories, the darkness, the fear, is all shadow waiting to be liberated. So then we can create death to old patterns and rebirth new ways of being that are aligned for us. Of course, just as we talked about that power to refocus, because again, just to make this clear, as secret witches, whatever we focus on, we create. Now, this is one of the kind of pivotal misunderstandings about the secret witch, is the witch is a powerful creator, a powerful manifester. They can create whatever they focus on. So focus is really a powerful thing for a witch. Wherever our focus is, we will get more. It's just that most of the time up until this point in this journey, you've probably been focusing in the direction of mundane. So the work we're in is to liberate ourselves, liberate our souls, liberate our bodies, liberate our nervous systems to feel safe enough to be able to refocus in the direction that we long for. And that is the direction of magic. Ultimately, you know, we want to create magical lives. We want to reclaim our power to manifest magic, ultimately. So our focus is really important. And as we begin to understand our feelings as messengers, rather than as scary emotions that we want to evade, we also begin to learn to navigate whether we need to process something, because obviously we don't just say, you know, just kind of refocusing all the time isn't processing that trauma or, you know, creating that nervous system autonomy. If we kind of just go, right, we're just going to refocus in this direction without doing the work to liberate and create autonomy for our nervous systems, we're not going to feel safe because we're just suppressing everything. So the work really is in processing and refocusing. And you'll come to know that as it becomes more familiar, because when we begin to feel safe, when we begin to process, when we've been through that descent, we then come out the other side and we're able to alchemize our darkness into gold and begin to really start to focus on our vision. But the guidance on whether we need to process or refocus is really our bodies. So we need to get really deeply intimate with our bodies. We need to really know, is the feeling we're noticing that's bubbling up, it might be fear, or it might be kind of a natural feeling that needs honouring. So for example, something like grief really does require processing safely. Whereas fear, which often shows up differently, sends our nervous system on edge. Often that's coming from old stories. So this is the work of liberating our old stories. But the guidance is in the body. So generally, the kind of natural, more open, more authentic feelings that are kind of almost like part of the natural cycles of life, a bit like the seasons have winter, you know, that idea that grief is a natural human emotion, that will often feel more open and authentic. And that is a pointer, an indication that we really do need to just tend to our nervous system and honour those feelings to expand through them and process them safely. Whereas something from shadow, something from fear, will show up often as a closed feeling that sends our nervous system into overdrive. And again, you'll start as you journey through to get a feel into more consciously whether this is something that needs processing or something that's coming from an old story, which you can illuminate and then choose into refocusing towards who you long to be. And I hope you can kind of sense into the energetic difference between the two there. We're getting a bit deep now. This is again part of the past, so I will probably at some point do a whole episode on that in itself. But for now, we'll stick with the basics, which, you know, don't even necessarily feel basic, but the first steps, let's say. Ultimately, this all offers us choice, and the choice is, will we choose to create our own safety, to begin to allow ourselves to become our fullest selves? Will we choose to create the safety required to liberate our secret witch? Or will we consciously choose, because we've illuminated it now, it's a choice, so the choice is yours, will we consciously choose to stay as we are? Because that is an option too, you know, even choosing to pay the victim price is a choice from power if done consciously. But just beware that with that choice of choosing to pay the victim price, there are sacrifices to be made. And the main one is losing your true self and your power, not living the life that your soul came here to live. So, important decisions. And I'm guessing, I suspect that you are here, if you're still listening, that you're going to be choosing into the powerful practices and the powerful inquiries that I have offered in this episode. So yeah, I'm really celebrating you in that. Yeah, it's going to be magical. So, and again, if you've got any questions, if anything comes up for you, I am always here to help explore that with you. So do just reach out. But as you begin to create your own safety, you'll be more able to discern the things that you choose into, the edges you take yourself to in your own life. So you might consciously begin to see how to stop the pattern of choosing drama and instead choose to take yourself to your edge in creating a more solid life. So for example, I now take myself to my edge via the consciously chosen edgier feeling things in, say, my business these days, rather than creating a load of personal drama, which at one point I would have found really compelling and just no longer feels aligned, because that is not the path of soul. It's not who I came here to be. And that is very much possible for you too. Because as you become safer, which you will be able to do, you'll feel freer to begin to dream and vision and see possibilities for yourself. Really sense into, the more you're in your body, who you long to become. And as you do, you'll likely begin to have the next step revealed to you. So the next breadcrumb along the path of soul, as you feel safer and safer to see more and more ways that you can align with the woman you long to become, the next breadcrumb will be revealed. So overall, just to sum up before we end, because we're literally right at the end now, the theme is really, as you create safety for yourself, you'll begin to be able to reclaim your relationship with fear and harness it to choose into the scary feeling things that actually align you with your soul's purpose and gifts from a place of conscious choice, so from your majesty, in order to live your world alchemy. And having said that, still, the invitation is to go as slowly and gently as you need. Just keep following those breadcrumbs. That is my invitation to you. So that is the end of this episode for today. I'm going to share the takeaways in a minute. But as I said, if you have any questions about any of this, if anything comes up for you that you want to explore, do just reach out. I'll put the link to reach out in the show notes. I'd love to hear what you thought as well. So do let me know. And I will chat to you next time. Lots of love. Well, my loves, I enjoyed sharing that so much. My key takeaways, if you want a quick summary, is that often the secret witch won't feel safe because she's disconnected from her body and her nervous system is in trauma. And often from that, she's understandably and unconsciously created more drama, more trauma, which has created a negative relationship with fear. This means that any fear she feels about being in her full magnificence is literally pushed into the darkness, and she sells her soul for the love, approval, and safety she gains from others because of the misunderstanding that she has the power to create safety for herself. There are real costs and benefits of not choosing to liberate our relationship with fear and create safety in our nervous systems. The main one being that we can never truly become the woman we long to be and show up as our true selves because we stay too fearful. The cost is that we pay the victim price. Without feeling safe and tending to our nervous system, we will not feel safe enough to dream our big dreams. We may feel lost and like we still need to discover our gifts, even though we have a sense we are made for more. If you can't access your dreams and visions, it's likely you just don't feel safe to. If, however, we do the work to liberate our dark experiences and reclaim our relationship with fear, we can harness it to more consciously choose into ways of being that align with our soul and take us to our soft edges in order to live our world alchemy and create magical lives. This process requires a great amount of love. Anything that isn't love is still fear and comes from shadowy ways of being. The aim is that we begin to feel safe, and to do so, we must love ourselves through our fear. A great simple exercise is to begin to reconnect with your body to invite your soul back into your body. Simply tapping your body and saying, "This is my arm, I welcome you back," offers your body the deep knowing that someone with powerful majesty has shown up to listen to it and create safety. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.